just want to make sure people are sitting where they can see one of the two screens. It's going to be the same presentation. We're just here to narrate. But if you can't see a screen, make it so you can. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Saylor with the City of Bowling Green Planning Department. I have been working with Andy Verhoff from the Ohio History Connection and his team who traveled here from Columbus. We appreciate you all being here. Also, on behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission, if the members want to stand up, we appreciate all their work. We also have friends of the HPC that are very helpful also. So again, we're happy you're here. We're really excited to see I really hear all the questions and then see some of your properties tomorrow. And I will kick this off to Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Verhoff, like she said. Heather's been great to work with. We have maps of our sites we're going to visit tomorrow, and they have pictures on it. And that may be the regular way you do things up here, but it's not everywhere. So anyway, I'll stop going on about that and say that thank you for coming out this evening and welcome to the Building Doctor. We're glad to be here. We came up from Columbus a little earlier today, and nice drive. Everything went very smoothly, and we look forward to sharing with you some of our information tonight. Thank you, Heather, for being such a wonderful host and co-host and organizer, and maps with pictures. I'm stuck on that. Just get used to it, okay? So thank you for working with us. The Building Doctor is a free service of the Ohio History Connections State Historic Preservation Office. The office is Ohio's official historic preservation agency. It identifies historic places in Ohio, nominates properties to the National Register of Historic Places, reviews federally assisted projects for effects on historic, architectural, and archaeological resources in Ohio, consults on conservation of older buildings and sites, and offers educational programs and publications, like the Building Doctor. The Building Doctor program is made possible in part by a grant from the U.S. Department of the Interior's Historic Preservation Fund, which is administered in Ohio by the State Historic Preservation Office. Each clinic is also made possible through the support of local sponsors. So again, thank you. Correct me on this. Restrooms are right out the door and to the left there. Okay. For those of you who have signed up for site visits tomorrow morning, we ask you to please be at your place 20 to 30 minutes before, because sometimes schedules run ahead of time. I can guarantee you the 9 o'clock visits will not start until 9 o'clock because we are sleeping and getting up and getting coffee. But everybody else, if you get there maybe 20 minutes or so early, just so if we run a little early, we can keep things moving along. And we're very happy to report that 10 of the site visit slots that we have are full. So thank you for signing up. And if you're on the wait list, if somebody drops out, I think, Heather, you'll get a hold of them and let them know. Abigail, I think, will get you an envelope. You're doing one, right? Who are doing site visits on look at my map. Look at my beautiful map. For Building Doctor 1, who's doing, I think the first one is Anessa Miller. And then the next one is Suzanne Midden, yeah, and Ellen Hatcher, and then Rose Drain, and then Lynn Pearson. Okay, Pearson. Sorry about that. Would you get them, or would you see Abigail for a special envelope? I mean, it's not that special. It doesn't have $100 bills in it, but we think it's special. So. What you're going to learn during this program is how to recognize and solve some of the most common sources of problems in maintaining older buildings, and then how to make informed decisions on repairs and improvements. Not all of us are contractors, but if you love an old building and care for an old building, you're going to be working with contractors. So one of the purposes of this program is to give you the information, the knowledge, and the tips you need to work with a contractor or a repair person profitably. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our building doctors. Justin Cook has a master's degree in historic preservation from the University of Vermont and with additional studies in history and urban and regional planning. He has a bachelor's degree in classics from the University of Pittsburgh. He reviews applications for federal and state historic preservation tax credits and previously reviewed projects for federal funding, licenses, or permits. This is about the 30th, 50th?
Somewhere between 30 and 50.
Clinic he's helped to lead. A lot. Lots and lots. The tens, in the tens. And then Jessica Chunat, right here, is an Ohio native, and she joined our office in June of 2002. She reviews applications for federal and state historic preservation tax credits, and she has a master's degree in historic preservation from Clemson University and a bachelor's degree in architectural studies from Kent State. Go Golden Flashes. I shouldn't have said that in this town.
My sister's a Falcon. It's okay.
Okay. You know, I got to watch where I'm at. Okay. And they're joined. We have some building doctors in training. And to kind of go with a medical metaphor, I call them our residents. Dun. So we are joined by Abigail Rosenau and Vanessa Gabrielle. And Vanessa joined our office in January of 2023 and also reviews applications for state and federal historic preservation tax credits. She has a master's degree in historic preservation from the Boston Architectural College and in theater stage management from Rutgers University. So you should be up here staging all this stuff. Why am I up? Okay. Yeah, someday. Her undergraduate degree is from Kent State, and she has special expertise with how historic preservation tax credits and low-income housing tax credits can support preservation. In her spare time, she's renovating her own historic home in Columbus, because you're a glutton for punishment. Not a glutton for punishment, a glutton for pleasure. Right, okay. And then Abigail back there, Abigail Rosenau, she works as an architectural project review manager in our office, and she works on projects affected by state and federal funds. She has a master's degree in historic preservation with a concentration in sustainability and a bachelor's degree in public history. Yay, that's what my degree's in, from Ball State University. During her graduate studies, she was part of a team that was awarded second place in the 2022 Charles E. Peterson Prize for their historical report, field drawings, and measured drawings of Old Fields, Indiana, Interurban Bridge in Indianapolis, Indiana. So without further ado, Jessica.
Can I interrupt 1 minute?
Sure.
I have the Route 2. So if you want me to read the Route 2, do they have envelopes too?
No, they don't.
Okay. So Cindy Goldfish, Mary Dennis, Vera Lux, Jan Knapp, and Aaron Hochtel. Okay, thank you. So,
And yeah, just to clarify, I joined in 2022. You said 2002. I was a baby.
You look very mature for your age. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. So like you said, my name is Jessica. It's great to be in Bowling Green tonight. Our purpose this evening, here's my clicker, is to help you understand the characteristics of old buildings, why their features and systems matter, why they fail, and what to do when that happens. Some of you, like you said, some of you maybe, your own contractor, DIY, that sort of thing. Most of you may not be, and that's okay. This knowledge is really good to help you identify who you should hire if you did want to get stuff done that you're not comfortable doing. Like I will probably never climb on a roof and repair that myself. So to know who to hire to do that. In order to figure that out, though, you need to know what you're looking at. Photographs, other records of old buildings are really important, but they will never really substitute for having the actual building and the actual material that it was historically constructed with. That was the slide that was supposed to be. It's common for the terms restoration and rehabilitation to be confused. Restoration is bringing a building back to exactly how it looked when it was constructed during its kind of period of significance, when it was architecturally or historically significant. So this is a building. The top, you see the historic picture. The bottom right, we see the picture before its restoration. It lost its parapet, it's lost its top floor. Doesn't really look a lot like it used to be. And then bottom left, we see it restored back to its historic configuration. Total restoration can demand removal of electrical wiring and installation of gas lighting, and it's typically reserved for museum properties or properties of really high significance. You're probably not going to be precisely restoring your home. You're probably going to be rehabilitating your home, which is taking a historic building and bringing it back to a useful condition and respecting the historic characteristics it has, while repairing and retaining those elements that are significant. You might repair the old porch and fix it back up and repaint it, but you might take out the old furnace that doesn't really work and put in a modern furnace. Rehabilitations take place, we say, in the real world, in buildings that have to function and not just to be admired as museums. So we see on the left, Dayton, there's a commercial building. On the top is before and the bottom is after its rehabilitation. And then on the right, we see a mixed-use commercial residential building in Cincinnati before and after its rehabilitation. So it's still used for the same purpose, just has a modern, kind of use, but the historic characteristics are still honored. One of our biggest pieces of advice that we give when you're looking to rehabilitate an older building is not to rush, right? You want to take your time and you want to get to know the building. You want to do research on it. Finding historic photographs, finding historic maps, and kind of documenting its history so you know what you're looking at when you start to peel back the layers. The order that we suggest going in for historic rehabilitations is good maintenance, then repair, and then exact replacement if you can't repair. The old materials of a building, its historic wood, its historic slate, are what make the building historic in the first place. So if you can find contractors, consultants, architects that know how to work with historic windows, know how to repair those, that is the more ideal route than replacing your windows with new ones. Not to say that if you've taken out your old wood windows that were a little leaky and you've put modern vinyl windows in, that's not the end of the world, right? This is just the historic rehabilitation approach that we take in the office. Routinely, we suggest, when you're working with contractors, getting second and third opinions, checking references, and checking the actual installation of products you're considering. Because sometimes it looks different on a paper than it does on a building. So in our office, like Andy said, we're tax credit reviewers. We review projects that are being rehabilitated for tax credit purposes. And when we review, we have standards for rehabilitation that we want to make sure that the building is following. They're adopted federally, and they guide the successful rehabilitation of projects. There are 10 common sense principles that emphasize preservation of historic character, repair over replacement, and compatibility of alterations. They apply to all different types of historic buildings, interior and exterior, and there's a copy of those in your booklet. So historic character is what makes the building, right? So we're looking at the environment, it's in the size, the materials, the craftsmanship, details. Everything that you see when you look at a building is what goes into making the historic character of the building. So just like you probably go get a physical checkup every year, your old building should also be inspected. Deferred maintenance or, infrequent inspections can cause minor problems to snowball into larger problems. We provide a pretty basic start for how to inspect your building in our Fast Facts article about basic building inspection, which should be in your building doctor pamphlet. It's one that most owners can follow to inspect their buildings, and at least once a year. You want to try to observe the building from different angles and different locations and looking at it at different times of year. And this is a great time, I think, to be doing our building doctor program because it's raining. And when it's raining, especially when it's a really heavy downpour, that's when you're going to see a lot of your problems because a lot of problems that incur with historic buildings are due to water penetration. So if you can see where water is coming in and how water is causing damage, you can start to get a better idea of why your plaster is starting to fail, or maybe why your roof is starting to fall apart or something. You can also look at Preservation Brief 39, which you've received to learn a little bit more about solving moisture problems. And we say with inspections, one really great thing to do is to start a file. So keeping results of previous inspections, keeping floor plans, photographs, drawings, kind of anything that you would think you might want to look back on in a few years when you're inspecting your building again. When you're inspecting your building, it's best to start at the roof because, like I was saying, how water is, one of the greatest threats to historic buildings. Water is going to hit your roof first. We suggest, going from the roof, then how your water is going to fall down the building, going through your drainage system, looking at your exterior walls, windows and doors, foundation, the site, and then going attic, interior walls, basement, mechanical, and electrical. For suspected electrical problems, we recommend contacting an electrician. And this is also a really good time just to remember to put, batteries in your smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, natural gas detectors, and also clean your dryer vent. So we're going to talk about some safety when you're doing inspections of your historic building. It's really important in any job because especially with historic buildings, there's a lot of things that may come up that you need some protection from. Taking care on ladders, reading all safety precautions, and wearing safety gear. You want to limit your exposure to hazardous materials like lead, mercury, and asbestos because those were all used at one point when we were making or redoing our buildings. One thing we say about those dangerous materials, though, is if they're not friable, they're not causing a problem right now, it might be okay to let them be and watch them. If they're on, we see a window on the left, and if they're on the part on the sash where it's kind of rubbing against each other, you might want to be watching that and maybe consider taking a damp cloth, and every time you see dust, you're going to wipe that down. But if it's on the frame or if it's on somewhere that you're not, picking at and it's not causing dust, it's not causing the lead to become, we call that friable when it's starting to pull away, watch it. We see the friable on the right-hand side. We see the friable damage painted on the left and then the sound painted surface on the right. So those you just want to watch. Roofs and drainage, like I said, are probably the first point that you're going to see damage to your buildings. Having a sound roof, flashing, and adequate vents and drainage can really help save your building. We see wood shakes and shingles, metal roofs, clay tile, asphalt shingle, and roll roofing. That's kind of a lot of materials that we see in Ohio. And the goal with any type of roof is to maintain it in good shape. Cleaning debris off of it, keeping it free of moss, trimming branches that may overhang on your roof, and sealing up seams, and renailing or replacing tiles will help protect your roof. So we can see in the slate roof in the top picture, there's a lot of damaged tiles, there's some cracked, there's some that have kind of fallen off altogether. If you can't get slate that's going to look exactly like the slate that you have, you can find substitute slate materials that will give the same appearance, may not have the exact same performance, but will repair the same and will look the same. So like we said, if actual slate replacement is a great idea. If it's not in your budget, don't just go for one that looks like slate, like we see in the bottom right. That doesn't, up close, it may look all right, but from a distance, you can tell that those are two very different roofs. So this is where we said, look at a sample, but then also look at it installed on a building because those are going to be two very different pictures at times. Asphalt and fiberglass roofs have come a long way in recent years and can look great on a historic building. If your roof needs replacement, we always recommend replacement with a material that is compatible to the building and not too heavy. Like if you didn't have a slate roof, slate is going to be really heavy on your roof and may cause additional structural problems. So you always want to pick, no matter what is appropriate to your roof. Roofs are also helped by the things that we can add on to them to prolong their lives. So drip edges on the side of roofs can help keep water from getting underneath your roof by directing it down and out. We see flashing a lot at chimneys, at valleys, and roof wall intersections. Flashing is often the culprit with leaks. You want to check your flashing and look for any signs of separating, cracking, or warping. The boots around your stacks and vents must be installed properly to keep moisture out of these vulnerable areas. So going from the roof down to the drainage system, we want to look at gutters and downspouts. Just like the name implies, a functioning drainage system is supposed to drain water away from the building. And if you're having trouble looking at your gutter and having it be a good gutter, it's actually better to have no gutter than to have a bad gutter. Because if you have no gutter, the rain is going to evenly all fall away from the building. But if you have a bad gutter, it's going to start to collect water in spots. You'll have large areas where you're getting a lot of rain and then dry areas. Gutters, we know in Ohio, we got to clean our gutters regularly because clogged and damaged gutters can back up and overflow and not drain water the way they're supposed to. So we see a few different types of gutters. We have our half-round gutter and our K-style gutter. And if your gutter is starting to fail, it's not always a sign to replace. Maybe sometimes, especially with box gutters, we like to reline those so we can still use them and protect our buildings. Another thing about gutters is making sure that they're properly sized. So if it's a pouring rain and you put your coat and your boots on, you walk outside to look at your gutters like we're suggesting you do, and you see that there's a lot of water building up, even where you have a downspout. Your downspout might not be entirely appropriately sized to maintain the water that's coming off of your roof. We see here there's a 6-inch gutter that has a 5-inch downspout, and that's going to properly catch all that water and then drain all that water on this roof away from, off of the roof and away from the building. Pair that with a really well-directed downspout that is going to point away from your building and not into your neighbor's building, we recommend. But it's going to keep that water off of your foundation, away from your building, and provide that good drainage so that any water that hits the ground is drained away. So you don't want that, that concrete box we see at the bottom, you don't want that tilted up, so it's going to drain back into your property. You want it to drain away. So just like I said, we need to be, sealing and flashing our roofs. We also want to make sure that our attics can breathe and our roofs can breathe. Roof vents, often called mushroom vents, are a good common option. Soffit vents, ridge vents, and gable end vents are also really nice choices because even if you get a small amount of water in your attic, it's not the end of the world, because if your attic can breathe, that moisture is, it's going to evaporate and it's going to flow out, and there's going to be that even flow of air. So by installing vents, you're introducing fresh air to help keep your attic dry, extend the life of your roofing materials, keep masonry dry, and, believe it or not, maybe help paint stick to your frame building better. Like I said, moisture is the number one source of problems we see in historic properties. If you start at the top with your roofing, your flashing, gutters and downspouts, and your vents, you've taken a lot of really big steps to help protect your building. So now we're going to go down towards the feet of the building. We can see here that there's probably some stuff growing on buildings, and I'll just say that if there's stuff growing on your buildings, it shouldn't be. The lower section of this downspout we see in the first picture is gone, and so the water has nowhere to travel down and out to protect the brick. So now the water comes out of the top downspout, and it just falls all over that brick. Water has salts in it naturally, and bricks love that salt. So it's going to gather in those bricks, and that's the efflorescence that we see. We also see some green stuff growing on that building. Not ideal. In the middle pier, we see that pier is getting some water on it, and it's starting to crack. And at the right, there's a gap in the downspout, which is allowing that water to fall out of the downspout and, eat away at that nice wood siding. And I know before I knew historic preservation, I loved ivy on buildings. I thought it was so cool, so collegiate, so pretty. It was on one of my college dorms. I really liked it, but it's really not great for the masonry. It's really not great. Those roots and those tendrils get in those little bitty cracks that happen in bricks, and then they grow, and they can cause cracking, spalling, and break the bricks. And then with that ivy on the front, it hides all of that, and that also traps moisture and attracts insects and birds. So as much as we love to see ivy, we do recommend to remove it by cutting it at the base. You don't want to just pull it off right away, because you're going to pull off some of that brick with it potentially. So you're going to cut it at the base and let it dry out, let it really die out, and then brush it off or pull it off and scrape it off. But make sure it's dead first. So on the top photo, we're looking at basements. We can see that those basement windows have all been blocked in, so you're not really getting that airflow circulating. Like I said about attics, same is the true for basements. You need operable screened windows or vents to provide that cross ventilation. We're looking to allow the air to flow through basements, and so bricks or other things stacked next to an exterior foundation can block sunlight and airflow. So I know my mom, for the 18 years we've lived in the house I grew up in, she always complained that her basement was wet, always. And it's a common problem. If your basement or crawl space feels damp, has an odor, or if you can see water on the walls or the floor, it's too damp. Good news is that it's actually really easy to correct. You can make sure that water is going into downspouts and draining away from your building, checking for clogged downspouts or drains. Or maybe just you need to install or improve the effectiveness of your dryer vent, or site drains, or a sump pump. But one thing that people tend to go to is waterproofing their basement walls, which you shouldn't be doing on the inside surface. I know it looks easy, and you just go down there one day and you just seal it all up, but now you're holding that water on the inside of the brick, which is going to still eat away at the brick and damage it, because if it wants to go outside, the dirt is still wet, so it can't really travel outside, can't really travel inside. Again, we refer to Preservation Brief 39 on waterproofing foundations, which we recommend to do from the exterior, which is not as daunting as it sounds. Dehumidifiers will also really help with damp basements. Your central air conditioner will dry out a damp basement air, but only when it's running. If you have dampness in poorly ventilated spaces, a dehumidifier set to run automatically is a good seasonal solution. So now we're on to exterior walls, which are going to also be a victim to water. This is a brick veneer that we can see. So there is the construction brick inside, and then they saved the nice, pretty, crisp brick for the outside to make it look really nice. And that brick is held up by metal anchors that go into the construction brick and then hold on to that exterior brick. The veneer brick pulled away when the anchors failed. Water infiltration is often the cause and is difficult to detect before major damage has occurred. In this case, we need to rebuild the veneer. So like I was saying earlier, the white stuff that we're going to see on those buildings is efflorescence. That's trapped salts in the brick. When the brick absorbs the water evaporates, but the salts that were in the water are still left there. Efflorescence can be brushed off, but chemical salts just below the surface can cause your brick to spall, which is when the face of that brick is going to pop off due to buildup. It takes wet masonry up to about a year to completely dry out. And so I know I said that there's chemicals inside of it, and you think, oh, well, I'll just clean those off. But abrasive cleaning is really not great for those buildings. We also see this can happen. Buildings can be abrasively cleaned when they were painted. We see on the right that this building was painted, and it was abrasively cleaned, and we didn't even get all the paint off, so you could still tell that it was painted. And now you've lost all that detail of the face of the brick. A brick, we like to say, is like a loaf of bread. You know, you've got that really nice crisp, like a French bread. You've got a really nice crisp outside, really hard exterior, and then a really soft interior, right? And so if you've sandblasted or you've, taken metal or something to scrape off all that paint, you've just scraped off the outer crust. Now you have that soft inside brick, which is so much more vulnerable to damage. Sandblasting, abrasive cleaning, including really heavy power washing, can remove that protective crust. It also roughens masonry surfaces, which creates even more surface area, so dirt and water can get in even easier. Improper chemical cleaning can also cause permanent damage to masonry. This building is suffering from acid burn as a result of incorrect or really strong chemicals like hydrochloric acid. Some proprietary chemical cleaners like acids, alkalis, and organic solvents can be effective, but we really recommend carefully selecting those, reading those science data sheets, and doing testing on an inconspicuous part of your building. That's really the best way to know what your brick is going to want. But also sometimes the option is just not to clean your building. I know we love a nice clean brick building, but the dirt isn't entirely always harmful. and cleaning is really only cosmetic. We can see on the right here that he's cleaning this stone building, and it's not going to get 100% clean. And you do your testing and you see how much dirt you're actually going to be able to lift with these cleaners, and you just do your best. Structural repairs and repointing are always going to be your higher priorities. But like we said, if you want to clean your brick, go for it. But just make sure you're being really careful and you're not causing any additional damage to your brick. On the other side, then, once you've cleaned your brick, you probably look at it and you think, oh, maybe that'd be nice to paint. Paint can, typically was applied early on in a building's history. And if it was, it should be retained. If not, it should still be retained. Paint is often applied to protect inferior or porous brick, and its chemical removal, which is difficult, can result in damage to the historic brick. So we see in this building on Cincinnati on the right, we stripped off the paint, but now we can kind of see why. The third floor it's not that we stripped off the bottom 2 layers. That's all naked brick, and it's 2 different types of brick, which is probably why they painted it. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to show everyone that. With brick comes mortar. Mortar is the glue that's going to hold those bricks in place. Early on, it was composed of lime and sand and maybe a little bit of Portland cement. Portland cement is that really, really hard cement, and this was natural Portland and lime. Sometimes the mortar is really soft. It may look kind of crumbly, and it may, if you kind of poke your finger at it, you scratch it hard enough, it may come off a little bit, but that's how it's supposed to be. It's doing its job. Mortar is meant to be, we call it sacrificial. So your mortar is supposed to fail way before your brick is supposed to fail, because mortar is so much easier to kind of shove back in those joints and to hold those bricks together than it is to put a whole new brick in that wall. We don't recommend repointing unless the mortar has turned to sand, which it may do as it receives moisture, or if it's actually missing or fallen out. It not only holds the masonry together, but it also cushions the brick from one another during freezing and thawing. Therefore, the mortar must always be softer than the masonry, so expansion and contraction will not harm the brick itself. And so we can see here what happens when the wrong mortar is used. That mortar that we see in the bottom left picture is much harder than the bricks, and so when those bricks absorbed moisture, they tried to expand, had nowhere to go, and they broke. Unfortunately, this is nearly impossible to reverse, because once you get to a point where you're able to physically remove that mortar, you're also probably removing that brick. In the top right, we see another incompatible mortar job in the repointing. He's working from the right to the left, from the top to the bottom. So that bottom left part is the only part he hasn't gotten to yet. But we can see how thin those mortar lines were, and those bricks were really kind of the star of the show. And now the mortar lines are much thicker, much heavier, and much more pronounced, and it really changes the visual of the building. So we really encourage using appropriately sized chisel and hammer, gently removing failing mortar, taking care not to damage the masonry, cleaning it out, and then mixing the mortar that you need only as much as you need, because you don't want to use too much. Finding, we want to look for something that's a close color and a close sand. You want to mist it, and then you want to do it in layers. So if you have a 2-inch mortar joint, you're going to shove a 1/2 inch or so of mortar in there, let that cure, and then do a little more at a time. You're going to build it up so that you're not doing, 2 inches of mortar all at once, and it's going to kind of start to crack. Once it's dried to a thumbprint, tool it by recessing to match the historic mortar joints, as we can see on the right. So you see those mortar joints on the right that are, kind of recessed into that brick, and so he's doing the same thing to the bricks on the left. And in the picture on the left, we can see what happens when you use an inappropriate grinder tool on those vertical joints. If you're getting in there enough to get out some of that back mortar, you're also getting in there to get some of that brick, which is why we really recommend hand tools. A lot of houses will also use stucco as a historic building material. It's a kind of exterior plaster. And when repairing it, we're talking about the same techniques that we used for mortar repairs. And so sometimes people, like I said about basements, think it's good to seal masonry with silicone or other penetrating coating, like we see here at the Union County Courthouse. And like I said, it's not entirely good practice because water repellent coatings such as liquid keep out liquid water but not water vapor, which can condense to form liquid water within the wall where it's trapped. The water, as we see here, froze behind the sealant and caused the masonry to spall. It can also change the appearance of masonry like we see on the right. On the right-hand side of that line is where the masonry has been coated to protect it. And on the left side, we see that the bottom part is being sprayed and the top part has not been sprayed. And there's such a visual difference between that brick. And so, again, that brick is being changed visually, and that's not what we want to see. Additionally, for interior brick spaces, a trend lately has been to remove plaster from those interior surfaces to show that exposed brick because we like to see what a building was made of. But we don't recommend it for several reasons. Because you're exposing that brick that was not meant to be exposed. It may not be a finished surface. It may not be an attractive surface. It might just be really cold to lean on. And also, more often than not, the exposed brick powders and flakes in and on everything. So every time you rub up against that brick, you're getting a little brick dust and you're like, oh, what happened? I did that. I'm trying to think of how to wrap this up, but that was the end of our first half of our presentation. That was kind of the overall what can happen with water in a building. We're going to take a brief intermission. If you've signed up to be if you're on Route 1 of our Building Doctor tour to see Abigail for an envelope, go ahead, get some water, use the restroom, and Justin will continue with the second part in about 5-10 minutes? 5 minutes. And if you have any questions, we're going to save those till the end. We'll do a Q&A at the end. Thank you so much. Hi, how you doing? I did, yes. Architectural studies. So, Bachelor of Arts program.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Taylor Hall. Yeah. I was that first class to use the new building. And it's pretty nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Up the ivory tower, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Sheriff Architect.
Oh.
Freshman, sophomore, we're up on the fourth floor. Upper class.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Lots water. Yeah, you're on water. Probably got some good water. You did before. Okay. So, if you know that there's no more water getting in, then that's probably a pretty easy fix. That's just an fix. Great. Yeah, and then scraping, a plaster of paint, and then we also wash it to make sure that there's yeah. Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, hey, as long as it's structurally sound and as long as you're making sure you're not getting into water. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Thanks for showing me. Yes.
I know. Yeah, it's about 30, 40, 50. So it would be very interesting.
Oh, good. I got to.
Yeah. First time. A little bit of humor. You know, have a little fun with it. Thanks, building doctor. Well, you know, it's funny when you say that. I was down It smells better down there.